Do you keep telling yourself, I need more motivation to study? There's a good chance that's not actually the real problem. The problem may not be that you're lazy or you don't care enough or that you lack discipline. The problem might be that your study system has too much friction. Once you understand that, the solution becomes much more practical. A lot of test prep students say, I need more motivation. But sometimes that's the wrong diagnosis. You may not be lazy, you may not be careless, and you're definitely not doomed. Your system may simply be too hard to start. The task may be unclear, overwhelming, uncomfortable, or maybe packed with too many decisions. In test prep, friction usually comes from two places. First, practical friction. This is when the task is too vague, too big, or requires too many decisions before you can even begin. Second, emotional friction. This is when the task forces you to face a weak area, a disappointing mock, or a mistake pattern you would rather avoid. When either of these happens, students often call it low motivation. But very often, it is friction. I'll talk more about these, but first, let's talk about this motivation that so many people value so much. See, motivation is usually high at the beginning. You make a new study plan, you watch a success story, you feel inspired, or maybe you get a disappointing mock score and you think, okay, now I'm going to be serious. But then real prep begins. The questions get repetitive, weak areas feel uncomfortable, review takes way longer than you expected, and the score does not jump immediately. It's like, why is nothing working? That is why motivation is a great starter, yes, but a terrible manager. It can help you begin, but it cannot manage your entire test prep journey. So instead of asking, how do I stay motivated all the time? Ask a better question. What is making this study session hard to start? Most of the time, the answer is either practical friction or emotional friction. Let's start with practical. Let's talk more about this. So, practical friction, means the task is not easy to start. It could be vague, it could be too big, or it could maybe require too many decisions. And you're like, I have to think about too many things before I can even start. The fix is actually very simple. Make the task specific, then shrink the starting point. What does this mean? Let's take an example. Study quant. This is not a task, it's a category. Your brain still has to decide which topic, which question set. Should I keep it timed or untimed? How many questions do I take? When will I say I'm done doing this? That is just too much decision making at the start of a session. And when starting feels unclear, your phone suddenly feels easier. So instead of writing study quant, write review rates for 15 minutes. Then do 8 untimed rate questions. Then review every mistake. That is much easier to start. The goal is to make the next action obvious. Instead of work on verbal, right? Do 3 RC passages, and for each one, identify the main idea, the evidence, why what was wrong was tempting. Instead of saying, review my mock, write down, analyze questions 1 through 10, and label each mistake. So, a good task should answer a few basic questions. What topic? What action? How many questions? How many minutes? What review step? When do I review? Specific is going to beat vague because it removes negotiation at the moment you need to start. Now, let's also talk about emotional friction, equally important. Sometimes you're not avoiding studying itself, you are avoiding evidence. Evidence that a topic is still weak, evidence that you keep making the same mistake, evidence that your mock review is going to expose something uncomfortable. So, students often choose work that feels productive but safer. They watch another lesson instead of doing questions. They reread notes instead of testing themselves. They take another mock instead of reviewing the previous one. They do topics they already know, they already like because those topics feel better. And because these activities look like studying, you would feel productive. Yeah, I'm putting in work. But smooth is not always progress. Sometimes the session feels smooth only because you chose the safer work. The solution is not to attack the scariest task head on for 3 hours. That usually creates more resistance. Instead of saying fix probability, for example, just say spend 20 minutes on basic counting and do 5 beginner level questions. Instead of saying review the entire mock, say review the first 5 missed questions. Weak areas feel uncomfortable. That's okay because they tell the truth, right? Truth is generally uncomfortable, but smaller tasks, they make the truth easier to face. So a lot of people would feel the sequence is actually this, that first I will feel motivated, then I study. But often the real sequence is something else. First, I take a small action, then I get momentum, and then I feel more motivated. The hardest part is often not the full study session, it is the transition into the session. So don't wait to feel motivated. Start smaller than your resistance. Open that error log. Redo one missed question. Solve 3 easy questions from a weak topic. Review one explanation actively. Even something as small as one missed question can be enough to break the resistance. The first 5 minutes matter the most. So the next time you think, I'm not motivated, don't stop there. Use this less friction reset. First, is this practical friction? Is the task too vague, too big? Does it require too many decisions? If yes, make it specific. Shrink the starting point. Or second, is this emotional friction? Are you avoiding a weak area, avoiding review, or choosing comfortable work because the useful work feels uncomfortable? If yes, lower the threat. Choose a tiny, honest action. Before you label yourself unmotivated, diagnose the friction. There is one trap I want to point out before we end. Planning can become procrastination. A new spreadsheet, a new notebook, a new schedule, a new promise to start fresh on Monday. These can feel very productive, but they do not matter unless they lead to a clear next action. You do not need a new beginning. You need a next step. A plan is useful only if it makes the next action obvious. So here is the action step. Before you move on, write down your next study task. Write down the time, topic, action, quantity, review step. For example, tonight, 8 p.m., rates. 8 untimed questions, review every mistake. Do not write study quant or just review my mock, review verbal. Make the next action obvious. Because the better question is never, how do I get more motivation? The better question is, what would make the next action easier to start? And once you can start more easily, the next challenge is consistency. How do you keep showing up when the day is busy, your energy is low, or the session cannot be perfect? That is what we'll cover in the next video. How to stay consistent in prep even when you are not motivated. I'll see you then.